So why are you a fan of nuclear?
Because it's not polluting until the whole thing explodes.
Yes, but just like, what?
Yes.
Let's face it, we all know the importance of a good, balanced nutrition diet. But the truth is, it can get really challenging to get all the nutrients you need every single day when you're running a very busy lifestyle or even running your own business. And if you're anything like me, you probably don't want to resort to a multivitamin pill that is filled with chemicals, binders, and artificial ingredients. This is why I'm so glad that I found Vivo Life's Thrive. It's a revolutionary health supplement that has all the power of a multivitamin, but that is made with 100% plant-based and natural ingredients that you can actually pronounce and actually recognize. Things like kale, turmeric, baobab, or even spinach. It's been backed by over 50 independent studies and was actually formulated by a nutritionist. That's why each scoop holds the antioxidant equivalent of 10 servings of fruit and vegetables, along with 15 essential minerals and vitamins, including B12, vitamin D, and zinc. The truth is, you just never know what your day is going to be like. That's why I just make it really easy and simple for myself. I add a scoop in either some water, my shakes, or my tea. It's delicious, it's nutritious, and it gets me focused for the rest of the day, and my energy levels have never been better. And here's the best part in it all. Vivo Life was so confident in the quality of the product that they took over 5 years to design that if you're not satisfied after 30 days, they'll give you a full refund, no questions asked, and you can even keep the product. If you want to try Thrive for yourself, you can go over to www.vivolife.co.uk and use the promo code MARK to get 10% off your first order. Podcasting is one of the most effective ways to grow your business, build an audience, and give your brand a voice. But the idea of launching can frankly feel a little daunting. What kind of gear or software should you use? What if you don't like the sound of your own voice? How to get great guests to come on the show? And how do you get people to actually listen once you've published your podcast? Well, you could go and find out on your own through trial and error, and that might take you forever. Or you could save yourself a ton of time and a ton of money by grabbing a spot on my brand new online video course, How to Go From Naught to Launch, that you can take from the comfort of your own home. That's right, I've made the process of launching a successful podcast from scratch super easy. So if you're ready and you want to stop wasting time, head over to theunconventionalist.com, click on online courses, and grab yourself a seat and use the discount code PODCASTTRIBE to get 20% off the entire program. I can't wait to see you in there, but more importantly, I can't wait to listen to your podcast. Hi, and welcome back to the Unconventionalists Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Leruste, and this is the show about what it's really like to turn your message into a movement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you are in for a treat. I have the one and only David Baker back on the show. The only guest not only to have come back twice, not three, but this is the fourth time that David's come back on the show. In fact, it's safe to say that when I meet people and they tell me like, oh my God, listen to the Unconventionalists, and I go, what's your favorite episode? They often say, that guy about work, about the future of work and why we need to talk about work. And that's David Baker. In fact, go back to episode 100, the 100th live episode. We'll talk about that a little bit at the start. That's David Baker. Incredible story, incredible journalist, broadcaster, storyteller, human. David, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Mark. Thank you.
Welcome back.
For inviting me back.
You've had literally every iteration of this podcast.
That's right. We're in a lovely building now, actually. And I just know you've got placemats.
I know.
I mean, coasters.
We made it, right?
It's really made it. You know, when a podcast has arrived, it's got coasters. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, literally, so the first episode you had, I'm sure we just had handheld microphones.
Yep.
The second one we had these weird,
the gaming headsets.
Yes. Yeah, we had those. And then the third one you came for the live, in front of a live audience.
That's right.
The first time you had a suit, which was the same suit you wore at the weddings.
Exactly.
You were in
the one suit. The one suit. Exactly.
And now we're like in this semi-official pop-up studio.
Well, look, congratulations on
thank
you.
you so much.
It's a real, rating the success of the podcast.
Yeah.
Well done, Mark. Really
Thank
nice.
you so much.
Really
Well,
nice.
thanks for coming back. And every time I see you, I feel both inspired and then terrified. Usually these two
That's
things.
how I feel all the time anyway. So I'm glad we're sharing it.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm glad you're offloading stuff that you're learning about, so I can then not
Absolutely.
sleep for 3 nights.
There we go. Exactly.
And then,
yeah.
but it's funny because you don't have mailing list, you're not on social media, and you send out an email to your friends as like a group kind of email saying, "Hey, I've got this piece on radio coming out this week if you want to check it out." And recently, and always a cat needs to be babysat. Or
Always, because I'm traveling, and who's going to look after my cat? If anyone's around to look after the cat, I just need a volunteer, please. Thank you.
Catsitters.com.
Cat sitters, absolutely.
And then, but you had a piece coming out. There was 2 actually on can Facebook survive? And I think there was in between around the impact of phones and social media on the youth, and you interviewed. They had a beautiful piece.
These are 2 radio programs.
Yeah,
I've done
but before we get to that, how are you, David? How are things?
I'm well.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've had a slightly up and down summer in personal and also work life, but actually that's good, and that's actually what life is like. We have ups and downs, and funnily enough, I was thinking about this on the way here about what we might talk about today, and partly it's about understanding ups and downs life, as well as just it's a constant trajectory towards coasters and new studios and whatever.
I love that.
But I'm well, and I'm in a good place, and very, very happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
100%. And it's interesting that you talk about ups and downs, because I think I'm going through that at the moment as well. Especially I just thought I got a second kid on the way, got so much going on. But did you recently do a travel to Brazil? Have you been to Brazil lately?
And I'm just about to go again. Actually, I was there in July.
Yeah. How come you travel so much to Brazil?
Because I teach at the School of Life in São Paulo. I cheekily set up the School of Life in São Paulo. I teach at the School of Life here, Alain de Botton's place down in Russell Square. And I have a long connection with Brazil, and I wanted to try and make it firmer. Yeah. And so a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, 2 colleagues of mine in Rio de Janeiro and I set up the School of Life in São Paulo. Okay. Well, we first set it up in Rio. Okay. But if you've been to Rio,
I've never been to Brazil.
Okay, well, if your listeners have been to Rio, they'll know full well that there's better things to do in Rio than going to the School of Life philosophy classes, which is basically the beach. So it never really worked out. But then we moved to São Paulo, which is a bit more like a city. Yeah, okay. And we're really flourishing there. So
you're fluent in Portuguese, Brazilian?
Well, not really fluent, but my Portuguese is good. And each year it gets better. Each year I go back and I do some more classes, my learning, and also I give some more teaching. And gradually I teach in a kind of mixture of English and Portuguese, and gradually there's more Portuguese and less English. And so I'm off again next week, actually. I usually go twice a year, but I'm actually going 3 times a year.
I hope you got frequent flyer points going on there, David.
Well, I will be honest and say I'm very embarrassed about my effect on the climate. And I need to try and work out what to do about this. Okay. I'm now flying at least 6 transatlantic flights a year. And this can't be right. Okay. Now, we talk about this at the school as well. We stand for important values, and I do too, about the climate. And originally, I was the only teacher in São Paulo. So obviously, the school didn't exist unless I was there. So obviously, I'd fly over. Now, we have 9 or 10 very good teachers. And so the interesting question is, why am I going over there, apart from lazily to escape the cold weather here? Which was the original plan. That's why I set it up, and I love the sun, and I love the tropics, and I love Brazil, and I love the culture there and the people. And so it's a great pleasure, but I am getting on an aeroplane. So this year, a few weeks ago, I looked into going on a boat. Yeah. And I think we've spoken about this before. In 2008, I had a sabbatical year in which, you may remember, I didn't fly for a year.
No, I don't remember that.
I had a sabbatical. I had 2 rules for the sabbatical. One was I wasn't going to write about anywhere I went. I used to be a travel writer, and and so that was
Did you have compulsion?
Compulsion
to write about the hotel you're
absolutely.
staying at.
The definition of not working on a sabbatical if you're a travel writer is not writing. So, and the second thing is I wasn't going to go on an airplane, and I made it to Jerusalem. Actually, went and lived in Jerusalem for a while. I went by land through Europe, and then Turkey, and then sadly, I went through Syria and Jordan, and I went to Aleppo and to Damascus and all those places.
How long did that take you?
Going there, it took me, I think, I didn't do it particularly in a rush. It took me about 10 days. You can do it quicker than that, but I just gently went through, by land. The last bit was a rush. I was running late, and I had to be in Jerusalem by the end of Friday. For this woman who was going to go away and give me the keys to her flat, who also had cats. Exactly. My whole life is cats.
Based around cats.
And basically, I was still in Syria on the Friday morning, and I'd sort of got a shared taxi with some people I met at this bus station. and went all the way across the border through Jordan and to Amman. And then I had the most wonderful moment of generosity. I basically meanly didn't want to change any money into Jordanian dinars because I wasn't staying in Jordan. I was going to go then through the West Bank frontier into Israel to go to Jerusalem. And I knew that I'd need 5 dinars to get the bus from the bus station to the border. And somehow or other, I had 5 Jordanian dinars in a sock drawer or something, so I had it with me. And then I arrived, and basically I was at the wrong bus station. Oh, no. And I went to someone said, look, how do I get to the border? He said, you go from that bus station to the border. And I went, how much is that? And he went, well, it's 5 dinars from the border. You just need to get your bus to the other bus station. And I went, can I walk? Like that. And basically it's like here in London, it would be like arriving in Golders Green and really needing to be in Victoria or something. You can't really walk, especially with your backpack. And he said, no, but you just need some money for the bus. And I went, well, how much money do I have for the bus? And he looked at me and he got in his pocket and gave me 5 more Jordanian dinars for that trip. And I was overwhelmed with that generosity. How, I have to say, I like being British. I love living in London, but how many times let's be corrected here, will a travel agent in Victoria Coach Station give a new arrival a £5 because they need to be able to cross the city? And it taught me a lot about generosity and about how generosity is way more than simply giving something to someone. Sure. It's the gesture itself, which is saying, you're welcome here. Even though I'm never going to see you again, I want you to feel grounded here. And that trip taught me quite a lot in that respect. And then coming back from Israel, I ended up on a cargo ship because I hadn't quite planned this through. I mean, I'm very useless or brilliant, who knows, at travel like this, with just setting off and seeing what happens. And so the plan was, I stayed in Jerusalem for about 2 or 3 months and I studied there. And then when I was coming back, obviously I had my no plane rule. And I hadn't really thought this through, and it turns out there's no boats going out of Israel. I thought there were ferries to Cyprus or whatever, but in the end, I just contacted some cargo companies, and I came back on a cargo ship to Athens with a whole lot of live pigs and some containers, which was amazing. And I tell you what was really amazing, was the food was amazing, because you're the rest of the people are crew, and they're having to haul things and do mechanical, physical work. So the food was big portions of great food, and I was there
to keep them happy.
And it was a wonderful group of people. There was one. We could go anywhere on the ship. There were about sort of 4 or 5 of us who were not crew members, passengers. And I was the only person who didn't really have a good excuse for being on the ship. I mean, other people were trying to ship a van or whatever, And there was one area which was our social area. It was called the salon. Now, if there was a more overnamed place than that, this was a grubby little room, smaller than this, with a little TV in the corner and just full of cigarette smoke. I mean, that was the room, And the crew was a mixture of Ukrainians and Russians and Turks and Greeks. There was the lingua franca was a kind of bad English.
So the English was the common language.
Yeah, the English was the common language, but barely. Yeah, I mean barely. And I remember it was 2008. It was during the Athens Olympics, and basically this little TV. If the boat got near some sort of signal, sort of sprung into life, and some random sports event was suddenly into shape on the street. And that's how we passed 3 or 4 days. Cool. It was an amazing trip. Now, to come back to Brazil, because obviously it did teach me you can go on boats somewhere. So this year I looked into how can I do the same kind of trip to Rio de Janeiro.
How long? How long would it take you?
How long and how much is the question.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's about 3 or 4 weeks from Britain. Each way. On a ship which, I mean, this probably doesn't bother me. We should talk about this a little bit. It doesn't really have Wi-Fi. It has a sort of satellite email connection if you need speed. So it's a bit hermity. Yeah.
So have you got a book you want to write? Because that would be a good time to start.
Yeah, I think it would. It's very expensive. Unfortunately, compared with flight, it's almost all the agencies I talked to about this. This is not going on a luxury cruise. This is going on an oil tanker or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. So this is going on.
Is it not cheaper to take a cruise?
No.
Really? That's mad. Because it can't be. I mean, have you looked into it?
Yeah. You know what? Now you've said it. Okay. So basically, the travel agent said you got a budget about €150 a day. So, and 3 weeks turns into, I can't do this on 5,000 euros or something like that. You know, I don't think you can get a cruise to Rio for 5,000 euros, or maybe you can.
Maybe you can. But here's the interesting about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going, all right. So
I just assumed a cargo ship would be cheaper. You're right. Yeah.
No. I reckon because of scale, the cruise will be cheaper.
Okay, interesting.
That's what I make up.
Okay.
You know, don't talk about Thomas Cook obviously at the moment. But
no, we're not mentioning Thomas Cook. Yeah. Did they even do cruises?
Yeah,
oh, they did. Okay.
I don't know. Did they?
I don't know.
But here's what I find interesting about that. Okay, so you're going, all right, how can I avoid flying more? Because flying is having an impact on the ozone, the climate, all this kind of stuff. So I'm looking at a potential trip of 3 weeks. Okay, so that's 3 weeks of food, 3 weeks of cooking, 3 weeks of all this. And I'm kind of like almost probing the bush here, but do you not think that there's also an impact on that? Like the amount of cattle, I don't know if you're vegetarian or if you eat meat, but all that kind of food that you're going to have to consume over 3 weeks, all the waste that'll be going in the ocean through the waste, I guess that could be recycled. Is there not always a way out of an impact? Like what's costing you? What's costing?
Well, I mean, yes, but in terms of carbon, I'm pretty sure that there's more of an impact going on an aeroplane to Rio de Janeiro. I mean, I'm not an expert, and I know there's controversy about this. And in fact, on my colleague Tim Harford on Radio 4 this week on this program, he does More or Less, which is very interesting about statistics. George Monbiot in The Guardian had said now I seem to remember, because I'm like every single person who listens to the radio, I listen to it with half an ear while I was in a different room ironing. Yeah. But I think the stat was we give off more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere through a leg of lamb than flying to New York. And they were investigating this stat. It turned out not to be true. But in that, they discovered how hard it was actually to work out how much carbon is put into the atmosphere by a passenger on an aeroplane. Okay. But I'm pretty sure
that you would have less of an impact.
I'd have less of an impact on my boat. Now, the trouble is, what's interesting, and actually in the way this is what I've been thinking about recently, is why do I not want to spend 3 weeks on the sea, or 6 weeks in total? And partly it's the opportunity cost. I mean, I here in London, I make radio programs. I don't think I could I could make a radio program on the boat, but I wouldn't be with my colleagues here at the BBC or with my producer or whatever like that.
I loved your show about purpose, by the way.
Oh, thank you. The impact economy. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was the other one.
And this actually made me start thinking about all of this, actually, because these are companies which are trying to reduce their carbon footprint. And to big them up, I don't even remember, there was a company called Pucker Tea.
I never know if it's Pucker or Puka. Pucker. Yeah,
Pucker
Tea. Yeah,
I think Puka is after you had a night out. It's like Pucker Teas. I mean, I was really impressed by them. And there was a statistic on it which really stuck in my mind, which was 50%, do you remember, of their carbon output. Now, this is a company which makes posh teas. Yeah. They'll hate me for saying that, but nice teas in coloured boxes. And they're shipping
little messages inside.
Yeah, exactly. And your listeners will know this because they're in the supermarket in the lovely, pretty packed.
You can definitely recognise. Yeah, and that's why I have a home. We actually
they're great.
Home.
They're great. Yeah. Now, their ingredients are coming from Indonesia, from who knows where, long distance. They're shipping them all to Britain. They're manufacturing the teas. They're putting them in the bags. They're putting the bags in little sachets. The sachets in the boxes.
Do you know if they've got plastic in their sachets? I've heard the other day, but
no,
apparently in tea.
I don't think they do. And in fact, that's the point. It's a woven fabric, basically. And because part of the problem is exactly that with our microplastics, is plastics in tea bags.
That's right. But to be honest, I heard that the other day, and it totally freaked me out. Someone said,
but plastics everywhere. I mean, look around us now.
Do you know what I was saying yesterday? I was saying this to my partner. I said, do you know how you'll remember these days? I remember these days where I was on a plane and people were smoking in the back of the plane. Yeah. And people listening to this now, it's like, that's crazy. How could you? Yeah. I think our kids are going to go, you had plastic bottles everywhere? That is mad. I think that's going to be as crazy it's going to be to us smoking in the back of a plane.
I'm interested in this because I would like to make a program about this, actually, because don't get me wrong, I am shocked by the impact that plastic is making on the world, especially the
1,000 years it takes for a plastic bottle, apparently.
So especially the plastic we throw away. But I'm also very impressed by the positive things that plastic has given us in our life. Okay. So I was talking to a hospital doctor the other day who pointed out that the introduction of plastic disposable items in a hospital reduces infection by about 99+%. It almost eliminates infection. Okay. And he said, you've got to imagine the old days when these things were metal, had to be autoclaved, had to be cleaned.
And the human error involved.
And there was a danger. And he said, people, we don't quite realise actually kind of what plastic has done for us as well. Yeah. So it seems to me there's two lessons here. One is we mustn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We must understand that
not all plastics.
All plastic is horrible when we throw it away, definitely. But we need to understand that it has created a function in modern human life, which has had huge benefits. And I don't even only mean for us rich people here in London. I mean, the fact that someone in rural Kenya can actually be treated for something and their wound doesn't become infected because the device that was used to stitch them up or to open up the wound or to take a sample or whatever is a plastic thing which is then thrown away rather than the
But that can be replaced by a different material.
No,
like a plant,
so that's what I mean. So what
plastic.
I mean is we need to go through two steps.
Okay.
The first thing is we need to say, what are we going to replace this stuff with?
What's vital?
Yeah.
Like, what do we need?
And how do we find that? Okay. Now, what's interesting to me is that when plastic was invented, it was seen as this miracle, amazing new material, which would solve everyone's problems. So we might be just about to invent another amazing new material, which will solve everyone's problems, and then discover in 50 years' time that we're polluting oceans with that.
It's the electric cars, isn't it? When you hear people arguing about how electric cars, actually, we still don't have a process of recycling batteries, and they're still, even though yes, there's less of an impact on the climate, there's still the big issue at hand that we're going to have to tackle at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Generations.
Well, we haven't really worked out how we can tackle nuclear waste.
Yeah.
I mean, the big deal. I'm quite a fan of the nuclear industry. I think actually it's good. Yeah, I think it's a good green technology, so long as we work out what to do with the nuclear waste.
Did you see Chernobyl?
Yeah.
Is it Chernobyl or Chernobyl?
I always get it wrong.
I never know how to pronounce it.
I think it's Chernobyl.
I was going to ask David because of all people, I thought you would be able to correct
I discovered I've been getting it wrong most of my life, and I've said Chernobyl, so I think it's Chernobyl.
Chernobyl.
And I also read the book by the guy whose name I can't remember now. It begins with Sergei Pikhlov, I want to say. Apologies, Sergei, I got your name wrong. There's a very, very, very good book. He's a Ukrainian guy who's written a book about Chernobyl, and I read that more recently.
Because that totally freaked me out.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about like the waste and how we don't know the impacts and the hundreds of thousands of years of how that's going to cause drama and chaos on the land.
So what's your solution to that? That we stop nuclear investment?
No, I for sure I'm not an expert. For sure, I don't even know where I stand. What I do know is when I looked at the of the kind of the, what do you call that, a documentary? It's not even like a TV
it was like
series.
A dramatization.
Yeah, that's it. And then I start looking into nuclear to try and understand, how does this even happen? How do we even get to create nuclear by atoms and splitting and bounce, all this kind of stuff? To get nuclear, you need to use minerals, right? Is that what, like, you still need to go and find natural reserves? You
need to find the ore of you need a radioactive metal, in effect, usually uranium. Yeah, and that's what you need to find.
Okay, and where do you find that? Is that mining? Like,
it's mining, yeah, okay. and it's quite widespread around the world. It's not like certain chemicals, certain metals you find only in certain regions or something. Uranium is pretty widespread. I think Australia is a massive exporter of uranium, but we might even have little bits of it here.
So why are you a fan of nuclear?
Because it's not polluting until the whole thing explodes.
Yes, but what?
Yeah. I think we definitely need to find ways away from carbon releasing fuels. I'm more of a fan of tidal and wind power as well, but I'm also a fan of nuclear because I think actually it's a technology that we, in general, have kind of worked out. We haven't worked out where to put nuclear waste and what to do with it, and I'd like to see a lot of investment in that. And Bill Gates, I think, has invested recently. The foundation, I think it's Bill Gates, has invested a lot in trying to develop, if you like, a non-polluting nuclear source, because in one sense, most of our conflicts in the next few decades in this world, I think, won't be about nationalism or about migration. They'll be about water and energy. And I think that I'd like the world to be able to focus on the real problem we're going to have with water shortages by solving the energy problem. And I think good nuclear, safe nuclear, will solve the energy problem. I know I'm controversial here, and
I'm surprised that you do, because I'm surprised. Yeah, what I'm surprised to hear is that you don't think one of the biggest crises coming is going to be migration. But when we're looking at, when the latest stats came out, that 4 centimeters of water rising would impact, I don't know how many millions it was of population and people living by the sea. That what freaks me out. Like, what I'm thinking about is there's going to be a massive migration issue in terms of population going to need some help, and how we're going to find a resource. I guess water comes into that.
Well, first of all, I don't think migration is a crisis. I actually think we humans have always moved around the world. that actually I think nationalism is a crisis.
Preventing the flow of people.
And I think the flow, my own family came from somewhere in eastern Poland, we don't know where, and took up residence in the United Kingdom at the beginning of the 20th century. And so I'm a result of migration. Now, I do really believe that most countries can deal with pretty much all the migrants that come to them, but psychologically the residents of those countries think they can't, including we Jewish people often during the 1920s and 1930s, and then through into the later in the 20th century, were very anti other migrations into Britain. And you see this a lot with immigrant families.
Oh, so the immigrant families then
they arrive and then they want to put the door down. Exactly. And so what we're dealing with, we're not really dealing with, if you like, total resources divided by numbers of people. We can find local versions of that. But I'm really convinced, and economic data shows this well, that actually immigrants are good for countries.
Sure.
They bring new commitment to work, they bring new ideas, they bring new ways of seeing things, And so I kind of think the crisis is not necessarily migration. The crisis is actually bits and pieces of the world running out of the ability for us to live on them, like, as you say, by rising sea levels. So water, next year we're going to be seeing massive water shortages in major cities around the world. And that's next year, let alone in 5 years' time. And so it strikes me that energy and water are going to be the big issues. Now, energy, I do believe, and even though I'm a fan of nuclear, I would love us to find a non-nuclear way to solve this problem.
Sun power.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I'm going to be making a program about this in December, hopefully, the November, December, that what I'm interested in is why is the whole world not solar power energy? Solar power anyway, I mean, presumably, and I think this is right. You don't even need to fill it. If you put loads of solar panels on the Sahara Desert, there's enough sun landing there to power the world. Full stop. The problem is kind of where does the wire go? There's two reasons with wires. I'm sure you know this. Like, there's a formula about transmission of electricity down a wire, which is like
no idea. So
it's basically 1 over d squared. It's like d is the distance from I'm providing the power, you're receiving it. The distance between you and me, and it's basically squared. So the longer the distance, the more the power I'm sending is diluted. So by the time it arrives at you, it's run out. And you can feel this if you put your hand near like a hot plate on a stove. As the distance goes away, it very quickly disappears. So one of the problems is if the wire is in, it's coming out of Algeria or something like that and heading towards Copenhagen, that's quite a long wire for the money, the electricity to run out. That's why battery technology is interesting, because actually there may be a way of harnessing this electricity and kind of shipping it to places or whatever it might be. The second issue is obviously geopolitical, that, are we comfortable, let's face it, Libya is not a very stable place at the moment. Are we comfortable with something like Libya having the wire for the whole of the world or something, So there are issues about hot places.
Got it.
But it strikes me that that's where we need to put quite a lot of investment. And coming back to me going to Brazil, crossing the Atlantic 6 times a year, my hope is
that would be crazy. If it's 6 times a year and you're doing 6 weeks,
it's not going to work.
It's never going to work.
No,
you'll be spending all your year
all time on a boat. Yeah, I mean, I could write lots of books then, but I might not have my friendships or the important
relationships,
things.
Friendships, and work.
So the interesting thing that challenges us at the school is, do I teach by Skype, which is the technological reason?
I was going to ask,
I don't believe so. And actually, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, actually, was I wanted to brainstorm a little bit with you, actually. It's about what does it mean when we're in the actual presence of a person versus anything mediated by technology.
I have an opinion about it.
Tell me.
Yeah. So the reason why we're here, the reason why you're here is I've done both ways. I've done interviews over Skype and I've done interviews face-to-face. And I made a decision after season 12, I think it was, that I was not going to be doing online anymore. And it was going to be face-to-face, because the quality of the conversation, the thing that we create, whatever the energy that you just, the equation that you just shared, dilutes with the connection over online.
Why is that? Is that the connection, or is it us not being able to work out the technological
There's
connection?
There's something, I don't know what it is, and I wish I had the answer, like a more eloquent answer to that. My very uneducated version of it would be that we're social creatures, we're humans, we have different senses than just the eye and listening and speaking. And that when we're in presence of people, something else shifts, something else happens that I can't put down on paper why. But I'm telling you, this will be episode 130 something. And throughout my entire experience, there just has never been more powerful conversation than I had when I'm in front of someone.
Yeah.
I've had great conversation over Skype, and Philip McKernan's one of them. I've had some great ones, but they are more the few rather than the many. And whereas conversation like this, I can pick up on things differently. I don't know if it's my, smell. I don't know what it is, David, but I can tell you that this is different. And I've done where I've spoke to classrooms over online, so Zoom, Skype, whatever you're using, and I've done it in person. And I think you can teach virtually. And I actually think that the future is going to be holograms. Like, did you see? I think it was last year. I want to say maybe it was last year, early this year. The leader of the left-wing party in France, La France Insoumise, did a conference at an event which was simultaneously in 6 different massive cities on like concert stages where it was a hologram of him. Did you see that?
No.
You'd be all over that.
You say I'll be all over it, but I'm feeling terrified.
No, but the reason why, in terms of like, wired and all that technology and stuff, the reason why I'm saying, and I saw that and I was like, oh crap, that's the future. That is the future. Can you imagine Rolling Stones in Madison Square Garden playing a concert that is simultaneously live across from Nairobi to Calcutta to and that is going to be it's going to be a future. It's going to happen.
Is it really live in Nairobi?
Well, there you go.
Calcutta.
So how is that different than you teaching over internet?
Okay. So I think I agree with you totally. I think a human to human connection in the same physical space is way better than anything we've invented technologically. And it might be my generation or my age, resisting that, but I don't think it is. I mean, I, a long time ago, trained as a psychotherapist, and just at the time when actually psychotherapy was emerging through Skype, and, this would be a useful way for people not to have to come into Hampstead or wherever it is, and I do know psychotherapists who do psychotherapy over Skype and their clients, and it kind of works, but it, in my opinion, what we're doing now, sitting opposite each other across the table, is better. Now, a Martian challenged with this question might say something like, well, I've observed that you human beings give off way more signals to each other than you imagine you do.
Sure.
And that those signals are blocked by the screen or the Skype camera or whatever. So, for example, smell is the first one. We're definitely smelling each other. I can report back. The smell's good, Mark. Don't worry. We're definitely picking up on tiny little body movements, not my gestures, but just maybe how my iris is dilating.
The texture's richer. The texture's richer.
And the Martian would probably say it's much, much, much richer.
You're right.
Now, in terms of teaching, I kind of think that if you're a lecturer, so many of those what are they called, MOOCs, online courses that Stanford University, Harvard, Yale give, and they're very, very good, for free. You can study computer science at Stanford 100%. Online. They're kind of lectures and then exercises. And that works really well. So it seems to be good for a lecture. You can stand up there, give a lecture 45 minutes. Speaking to, do some exercises, mark the exercises, be a teacher. The teaching I do at the School of Life is much more interactive. It's like picking up perhaps on those little signals, that texture and everything like that. Now, but the truth is, do I have a right to damage the environment because I think the teaching with this texture is better?
And by how much?
Much?
Can you justify, is it big enough for you to go, I'm going to impact the environment because it's worth it, rather than marginal gains of being in person? Well, there's something else I want to share. I actually want to jump in on that. When you're facilitating a classroom, it's very different than when you're speaking to a room.
Sure.
Do you get that? So it's kind of like, I've got an online video program on how to teach people how to launch podcasts. And I recorded it live. So it was actually a live full day boot camp, which was recorded and then transferred into an online setting. So that's like mixing both worlds, right? But I could see how I could have just spoken to the camera and just delivered the message. The difference, I think, when you're facilitating a group, especially in like the School of Life kind of world or like the Unconventionalist type of thing, emotions come up. People are going to have different styles of sharing bits of them. Some people speak a lot. Some people don't speak enough. You can pick up on subtleties with someone at the back that's not really paying attention because they're feeling a little bit more shy.
Absolutely.
And you can walk up to someone and go, actually, I'm going to interrupt you for a sec. And you can do that in person. I think it's going to be harder. Look, what I would love for you to do is test it and then come back and let me know what it was like. You might go, actually, Mark, it was so much easier than we thought it would be.
there is something more fundamental as well, which is like, what the hell is this guy from London going all the way to Brazil to teach in Brazil for when there are teachers in Brazil? What kind of post-colonial attitude
what does that send as a message?
Yeah. Now, I am aware, don't get me wrong, I am a good teacher. I do know this. But also my colleagues are good teachers in Sao Paulo. So what do we gain by me flying over the Atlantic and arriving in Sao Paulo, apart from I gain a suntan, which was the original point of setting up the school in the first place.
I get that.
So we're going to have to be wrestling with this. And I think climate change has provoked this. And it's actually interesting because it struck me this morning how events and timings do provoke thought. And one of the reasons is we're speaking, I'm Jewish, and we're speaking on the Jewish New Year. This is, yesterday and today.
Yes. Happy New Year, by
thank
the
you very
way.
much. It's
Yes.
Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
Now,
Rosh Hashanah, that's
in the culture and in the liturgy, the New Year is a time for self-reflection. We have a very interesting time just starting now called 10 Days of Return, where we have the opportunity to look into our lives, into our values, and also to go and make up perhaps with people that we've fallen out with in the previous year, to start the new year afresh with them. And many Jewish people right now are going to be doing something very beautiful, which is they're going to be ringing up that person who they've had a huge row with and they're not talking to each other. And kind of each of them will be expecting the call, and please God, they will make up. It doesn't always work.
But if I have a Jewish friend who had an argument, doesn't call me in this next 10 days,
he knows they hate you totally. Now, when I was on my way here this morning, I was looking at some notes I'd been making for something, a class I'm going to start teaching soon in Brazil, which is about technology and emotional intelligence. And I found this little phrase I'd written to myself, which was just a note to myself, like, we need to detach ourselves a lot from the technology to get back in touch with three things. And I wrote them down. I'm going to find, make sure I got them right.
Please.
If I can find my reading glasses, actually, I don't need them. Okay, to find out who we really are, how we really feel, and what we really want. Now, and it's suddenly these three...
Say that again, David.
Okay,
just people can...
To find, I think I'd written in the notes for this class, I'm like, we need to detach ourselves from technology for a bit so we can find out who we really are, how we really feel, what we really want.
Right.
And it struck me how little we actually... consider
for those who are listening, David just pulled out a lovely little notebook.
Oh yeah,
it looks like it's recycled paper. It's with the School of Life.
Yeah,
it's
and
a
it fits in
lovely
your
little notebook.
pocket.
It looks very quintessential to what you would imagine someone in a coffee shop writing down very thoughtful notes.
Well, you know what the thing is, it's actually the important thing for me is the size. How big do you reckon it is? Like 10 centimeters by 6, something like that.
Yeah,
it's
I basically that would be like A7.
It fits perfectly in your pocket.
It does actually,
and that's the great thing about it, that you can just, when you have an idea,
jot it down.
Yeah, you don't need your phone, you don't need your iPad, you don't need any bit of software.
Well, the irony of you writing that sentence on your phone would be
yeah, exactly. Right? So I was thinking, like, the Jewish New Year actually is actually provoking us also to think about these things.
Yeah.
Who am I really? What do I really want? How am I really feeling? Now, mindfulness helps us with how am I really feeling. But the truth is, almost all of those questions we ignore. Because the culture around us says, look over here. So look on the internet at something that's going on from an Instagrammer in Los Angeles.
Yeah. You want these abs. You want these perfect white teeth.
Exactly.
You want this cocktail.
This is who you want to be.
Yes, this is who you
should.
And if you
this is how you should feel. And this is who you really are. Now, and this is kind of a bit of a toxic mess that we've got ourselves into. And so it's kind of nice we're meeting on Rosh Hashanah, because actually, in a way, in the liturgy, God is asking us these three questions crucially for the next year. Who do I want to be? How do I want to feel? What do I really want?
What I like about that is a very different way of New Year's resolutions, right? Because like in my kind of Christian background, the New Year's resolution were like, what am I going to stop doing?
That's true. Yeah.
Or what am I finally going to start doing?
Yeah.
It's kind of like thing, and you have these long lists, and 98% of New Year's resolutions fail by like February the 1st or something. But what I love about those questions you're asking, I think they're universal questions.
For sure.
I think if you look at coaching, if you look at most kind of different school of thoughts about getting people to that, I love them. It's like, what am I really feeling? What do I really want? And what was the third one?
Who do I want to be?
Who that's it.
Yeah.
Who am I really am?
Who am I? Who I really am?
Yes. What am I really feeling?
What am I really feeling? Who do I want to be?
Yeah.
And who do I really want to be? And it's interesting because actually with feeling, it's actually quite weird, because you'd imagine we were in touch with exactly how we're feeling. But I think I think we're not. I think in the political situation in Britain at the moment and in America...
I need to ask you about Brexit, David, before you go, especially with everything that's going on.
Well, whatever our feelings about the actual, whether we leave or stay in the European Union, no one is in doubt that our politics are very fractious at the moment, and they're kind of violent in language, and they're becoming violent in deed.
Yeah.
And for me, I took an approach to this a few months ago, which was to kind of stop reading the news and listening to the news. And it's not quite true that I do that, because actually each morning I get the New York Times as a physical piece of paper delivered to my house, and there's something pleasurable about having a newspaper. But the New York Times seems to be like a bit distant from our Brexit argument, so it's like one away.
It's a different perspective.
It's different perspective.
England, I was in France over the weekend.
Exactly, there's a completely different set, and that was interesting.
And I was reading the papers. It's a completely different take. Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting. It's not about person X recently reneged on that deal to do Y and lied about Z or something. It's actually about the anxiety about the European Union, about our overseas allies, things like that. But I kind of felt it was during the Tory party leadership election. I suddenly thought, why am I following all these 12 candidates' points of view when I have no say whatsoever over which of them will win? And I suddenly thought, this is the kind of the illusion that democracy can give us, that actually we're involved. Whereas, unfortunately, apart from about once every 4 or 5 years, we're not involved. And I think that when we think about how do I really feel with this particular fractious environment we have in Britain at the moment, we're pretty much told how we're meant to feel, depending on how we voted in the referendum or how we'd like the outcome of the negotiations to be. So we're generally told we're meant to feel kind of angry or worried. That's the message we're getting from the culture.
Can I pause you just there for a second?
Yeah.
Because I think what you're speaking to, I just want to point this out. It's not just the news. It's not just the ads. It's that through our entire life we've been conditioned to actually being told this is who you should be. This is how you should feel. Like it's not. I don't think it's just like almost segmented just politics and news.
So it's everything.
It's everything. Like what we're talking about is unpacking a lifetime of habits of people telling us how we should feel, what we should do, and who we should be.
So maybe we need to look into and say the feelings that we do have but can't express. So, for example, it's kind of, I was going to say uncool, but it's kind of frowned on to say something like, I'm frightened. But this week, or last week, when Parliament went back after the Supreme Court case, and there were these speeches in Parliament which were really angry, I, for the first time, got frightened about our country. And suddenly frightened about climate change at the same time, all on the same day. And this is when I started thinking about my flights and everything. And I think that I'm quite proud to be able to say to you, here in the podcast, that I'm feeling frightened, because it's very rare that you hear that. It's kind of, I'm angry, I'm pissed off with them, I'm disappointed, these kind of words which are almost like the teacher or the parent. But an emotion like I'm frightened is a child's emotion. And we grown-ups are somehow not meant to express those, though I bet you there's loads of us who are frightened.
100%.
Yeah. And I think when that phrase, what do I really feel, when that jumped off from some notes I'd taken just a few months ago, that really struck me, because today I'm feeling a bit tearful and a bit frightened about our country. And usually we're only allowed to use these adjectives about somehow our personal life, our love life, or our family, or whatever like that. But I'm feeling that now about our country. And I think when it comes to the sort of work we do at the School of Life and the sort of conversations we have here, the power is not in petitions and protests and joining political parties, even though all of them are important things to do. The power is to say, what am I really feeling? Who do I really want to be? What these kind of ideas.
Is it a different question? Who do I want to be versus what do I really want? Are you putting them in this?
I think they're different. I think because. First of all, I think all three of them are fluid things. Okay. That it's not, Socrates pointed it out, or John Locke, I think, did. Do I mean that? Anyway, but somebody, somewhere in the history of philosophy, we've got this idea that am I the same person as I was 10 years ago, or even in 10 minutes' time, or whatever.
Cells rejuvenate.
Everything rejuvenates. Our feelings are different, So all three of these questions, and I'm going to get my notebook out just to triple check what they are. So it's, we need to find out who we really are, how we really feel, what we really want. And all three of these seem to me to be fluid. They're not like, there's not like I am really this and that's the end of the story. You know,
I get that.
That each,
I think they're access points.
They're access points into where am I now, and kind of where am I going next? Where am I going next? Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that when the route to looking at these questions seems to be through a certain vulnerability.
Yes.
And to be able to say to you,
down.
I'm frightened, I'm a bit tearful about the country, about, you know, the backstop, or about the EU negotiations, or about proroguing of Parliament. To use these words which kind of come from our domestic life into our public life, you know, frightened and vulnerable. These are the sort of things that we meant to leave at home and not bring into the public square.
Yes.
I think is going to be a breakthrough for us in society, because suddenly we're going to realize that what we're doing is we're pretending to have argument X, Y, and Z in the public square, but really we're having emotions A, B, and C, which we're pretending to leave at home.
I get that.
And this, for me, is why this thing, which in my opinion slightly clumsily we call emotional intelligence, is going to be important. You know, when we've met last time, we talked about the future of work and how these skills are going to be important in work. For me, I sort of feel I've taken it on a little bit now, that actually I think these skills are going to be important in living.
In life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
and it's public living. It's not only our intimate living, it's our public living as well.
And you know, what's interesting is I'd be curious to also hear your thoughts about this. Is this a generational thing? Is this a human thing? Are we just seeing, you know, there's an interesting article about a controversial kind of journalist who does a lot of YouTube. I think he's a columnist on The Guardian. I want to say John Owens, but I don't know if that's his name. Anyway, he wrote an article about millennials and like the so-called snowflake generation, which actually snowflake was another term for just man up. And like he made an argument about how actually, you know, we're talking more about feelings now than ever before. And are we creating the space for people to have feelings across generations, or are we just allowing this generation of millennials, Gen Z, to actually say, oh, we talk about mental health, we talk about loneliness, we talk about well-being, and that conversation is happening, but it needs to now expand to like workplaces and at homes. And what do you think is going to be the key to allowing people to say things like, I'm afraid, I'm tearful, I'm lonely, I'm unsure? What's the key behind that?
For me, the key is that we show them we'll hear what they say when they reply. So when they say it. So I made a radio program about mental health in the workplace, and the thing that really stuck in my mind from that was somebody in the Royal Mail, where they've done huge work in this to encourage people who are just working, if you like, who are working in the sorting office or on a postman or whatever like that, to be able to speak about their mental health. So that's a group of people for many reasons, primarily because they're men, who find it very hard to say, I'm feeling frightened, or I want to cry.
Period.
I'm feeling period. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the guy who was in charge of this program, he said, the first step towards this is when you ask someone how they are, stop to listen to what they tell you,
what they say,
rather than just walk on down the corridor.
Hi, how's it going?
How's it going? Yeah, exactly.
Classic.
That seems to me a perfect first step.
Yeah.
When we say, how are you?
Yeah, I say that.
Pause.
Listen to the answer.
And listen to the answer. Now, sometimes people will say, oh yeah, I'm fine, whatever, like that. Can you, and it's up to them to say that, but could you hear a sort of a slight duff tone in their voice, which means that it's not quite fine, and is it possible for you to go, are you sure? Is something cool or whatever? Open yourself up for them to be able to say something vulnerable. And in the meantime, be open and vulnerable yourself. Now, that is a risk, and many men don't want to take that risk because they don't want to be seen as, and we can fill in so many adjectives here, which we associate with women, to be honest. Weak, vulnerable, needy, all these kind of words. But actually, it's not. For me, it's strong, human, powerful to be able to open up. And I think, I told you while we were speaking, I've had an up and down summer.
Yeah.
And I'm quite proud to say that. I don't need your sudden, crashing of sympathy about, oh my goodness, what happened to Dan? Yeah. All life is up and down, and that's how we ride it. It's ridiculous to pretend that everything's just superb,
100%.
Great, 100% all the time, because we don't really hear each other. Now, clearly, in terms of our public life here in this country, it's a lot of down at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be saying, what emotions are we feeling? Because otherwise what's going to happen is we're going to go home and take out those emotions on someone at home or the cat or whoever it might be, or on ourselves. And there's a friend of mine who I very much would like to hear on this podcast, actually, a friend of mine called Kevin Braddock, who's done astonishing work regarding mental health, especially amongst men. And he's become a kind of champion of this, a pioneer of this idea that we should all be able to say, today I'm not feeling great, and I'm going to try and, I'm going to try and deal with it in this sort of way, but accept it. And then move on. And
normalize it.
Normalize it.
Yeah.
Normalize. Exactly. He's done so much work over the last 2 or 3 years to normalize talking about our mental health and our mental state.
Again, I think what you're speaking to is one of the issues that we haven't been taught these things.
Right.
Like, I know it sounds silly that we think, but we haven't been taught how to actually have a conversation with someone says, I'm not okay. Because then what?
Yeah.
Is it my responsibility to fix you?
Yeah.
Is it a burden now that I've got this? The one I'm most interesting about at this moment in my life is around death. When people say, I've lost my father, I've lost my child, I've lost, not knowing, and I just notice inside of me, I don't know what to say. And I feel awkward about it. And, when a friend tells me that he's lost his father, I want to be able to make him feel less pain. And I want to be able to do something, but I don't know what. And so as a result, you avoid, you say things that you are very kind of fabricated almost sometimes. And actually, it's happened to a friend recently, and I just said, I don't have the words. I just want you to know I'm sorry. And then I wish you hadn't had to go through this. But we're not told how to deal with grief. We're not told how to deal with death. There's a book I'm reading at the moment called The End in Mind, With the End in Mind. Have you heard about it?
No.
How to Live and Die Well. I should know the author. I'm not as good as you. I never know the authors. I know the book titles. I never know the authors. But it's about how to reinstate the idea of death in the everyday life.
Right.
We have births all the time. We recognize signs of you're about to give birth. They're the same signs for death. There are patterns around death that we can recognize to see you are approaching your final hour. And it's this idea that we just don't simply are teaching people what you call exactly emotional intelligence, some people call soft skills. I think it's always funny. They call them soft skills. Like, what is it soft about?
Well, I think it's ridiculous.
It's the foundation. Yeah.
Maybe
foundational skills.
Maybe when we're having our conversation in 3 or 4 years' time, people won't say hard skills or soft skills anymore. They'll say human skills.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. But I'm with you on death. I mean, we at the School of Life, we teach a lot about thinking about death, not about approaching death. Although actually a very good colleague of mine in Sao Paulo, Ana Claudia Arenches, she works in palliative care, and she writes a lot about the approaching of death. But Seneca helps us here, the Stoic philosophers, and I'm very pleased that the Stoics have become the cool go-to philosophers of Silicon Valley.
Help that. Yeah.
Exactly. But Seneca was very clear. I mean, he said, let's face it, you and I sitting here in Camden in central London, please God it doesn't happen, but after we've finished recording this podcast, we might step outside and there'll be the number, I don't know what the buses here are.
The exact same thing in episode 1.
Exactly, and I still believe this, and so the question will be, have we had an authentic good time right up to now?
Yeah.
Because we don't really know what's going to happen in 10 minutes time or in a week's time or in a year's time or in 38 years time or something like that. Now, you asked a question about whether it's the Generation Z or the millennials or whoever they are who are opening up emotionally. And my gut feeling is that yes, it is, and that we can learn from them and take their lead. The great danger is that we leave them to do all the emotional thinking of the world and that we pretend it's somehow not for us. Now, all of us, in my opinion, need to think more cross-generationally, spend more time with people younger than us and older than us, both to teach and learn continually in a two-way process. And when it comes to thinking about death, also, I've had a friend who's lost her partner this year, and it was very shocking, and it was very sad. And I agree, it's very hard to work out what to say in that situation, because the one thing you really want to say is, leave it to me, I'll bring them back to life, which is the one thing we can't do. I'll solve this problem by rewinding time, is the inclination. In Judaism, we have a phrase, which is, I wish you long life, which is a very interesting phrase. You're talking to the living person, the mourner, and saying, I'm wishing you long life.
Oh,
not
so someone who's lost someone,
you
would say,
wish you long life.
Okay.
And that's a kind of little formulaic way of, I think, probably bringing the spotlight back on the living around us, actually, which is a very Jewish thing to do. The person who's passed away has gone. And and we want to put the spotlight back on the person who's missing them, who's still here with us now. But also there's very ritualized kind of mourning, which I like in the religion, about, when how much attention you pay to the person. But also a friend of mine had a very good phrase, which was, please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I'm very good at saying no if I can't do it. And I thought this was a very lovely permission, because basically
I love that. I'm very good at saying no if I
can't do it. So in other words, don't hesitate to ask. And
because I have boundaries.
If I say yes, I mean yes, and if I say no,
I love the clarity.
I mean no. And that for me was a great phrase, because it meant the person can ring up and say, "Is there any chance you can pick up the kids from school on Thursday? Because I don't want to leave the house." Yeah. And if you say yes, they know you really mean no problem. I'm picking the kids up. And if you can't do it, you will say no.
I love that.
And maybe this is a good lesson for all our human interactions, that maybe this is the route towards eventually saying I'm feeling vulnerable, or I'm feeling tearful, or whatever it is. To be just honest, to announce to the other person that we are honest in our replies.
I get that.
And probably not polite or over polite in our replies.
I get that. Do you know who Adam Grant is?
No, tell me.
He's an organizational psychologist at Wharton, I believe, or Pennsylvania. He's got an amazing podcast. You should check it out, called Work Life. Giving a little shout out to that podcast. And he effectively goes into his companies who do one thing really well that he wishes every company does. Yeah. And one of the things he talks about at one point about vulnerability and trust. And so a lot of people actually think that you need trust in order to be vulnerable. Well, actually, science and research backs the opposite, that vulnerability breeds trust. And so what I'm hearing what you're saying is actually by saying, hey, look, I am very good at saying no, and I will say yes if it's a yes, it's a no if it's a no. You create that vulnerability and trust in that process. So the person can then go, I can lean in and I can be vulnerable with you, because I can trust that if I do ask and you say no, then it means no. If it's a yes, it's a yes. I really love that. I think that's a great one. There's something that sparked in my head while you were saying that. I was wondering if one of the questions, not to add on top of the 3 questions, because I love the rule of 3, but a question would be, if you were to die today, would you be happy? Would you be content? If not, why? And what needs to change?
Yeah, I mean, presumably you wouldn't be content that you were going to die.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
would you have lived the life according to the life you wanted?
And
right?
I think that's that's almost for me the fundamental question, which is why I like the Stoics and I like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius.
I've been reading the Daily Stoic.
It's a great email. It's a real pleasure.
It's interesting.
It's a pleasure. What's interesting about the Daily Stoic, and apologies, Daily Stoic people, is how more and more commercial it's becoming, how 100%. Many more things it's offering for us to buy. Now, they're probably, first of all, it's a very Silicon Valley thing, but also, secondly, they're kind of discovering it does cost money to send out an email list and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And it slightly disturbs me, but that's because I refused to pay money for it. I just wanted this free thing to be this touch every day. But in a way, am I living the life that I want to be living? Am I, if I am, as we said in episode 1, if we are knocked over by, I think it's the 137.
Yeah, it was there was the bus. I remember we were in Hampstead.
It was that, and we have about 30 seconds left to reflect.
Yeah.
That's the key for me. And actually this is very much coming back to the fact when we're speaking right now, the Jewish New Year, this is exactly the prompt of the liturgy and the religion at this point of time. Because in a very old-fashioned way, and I don't personally believe literally this is what happens, God right now is reckoning whether we will live or die in the next year. There's lots in the services in the synagogue at this time of year in Judaism about God decides who will live one more year and who will die in this coming 12 months. And if you're very Orthodox, or if you're a medieval Jew, or much more believing Jew, or rather than a metaphorical Jew, if you like, you believe that God literally had books in front of God with your name in it, the book of death and the book of life.
Oh my gosh.
And these next 10 days, you could move from death to life. And this is why people are going around trying to patch things up and trying to, and in a way...
Talk about pressure to make sure you heal and
now,
fix.
I personally don't believe God does decide whether I will live or die in the next 12 months, but I do get this nice idea that actually maybe I will die in the next 12 months. So what am I doing about that person who I've fallen out with? What am I doing about that project I always meant to get round to? Yeah. What am I doing about the stuff that I don't really like in my life but seems to be still present in my life? And these 10 days between the New Year and what's called the Day of Atonement, it's next week, for Jews is a time for exactly that Seneca, Marcus Aurelius-like reflection on, am I doing the right thing? Do I need to eliminate some people from my life and reintroduce other people into my life? Yeah. And something I did this year, which sounds so brutal, was at the beginning of this year, in the secular calendar, in January, at the New Year's resolution time, I decided to eliminate from people I spoke to 2 people who'd become very toxic in my life. And I haven't spoken to them since. And it's been very good for me. I can't speak for them. I've no idea if they've even noticed. Who knows? But
so you didn't actively tell them?
No,
that
I just decided. I'm just decided.
Okay.
Not going to contact them. If they contact me, I won't reply in that casual WhatsApp.
We should
kind
meet.
Of way. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
And to be honest, interestingly, they haven't been in touch, which means probably I'm insignificant to them, and they were much more problematic to me.
Yeah.
And it's been nice, and that feels grim because we're not brought up with this idea that we're meant to lose friends, we're meant to make friends and gain friends, and that. But we also need to do a bit of a clearing out of the people around us. And perhaps coming back to vulnerability, the big test is something like, who can I say I'm feeling a bit frightened to, or I'm feeling a bit tearful to, and not feel it might risk the relationship between us, because maybe many of us are in relationships, I don't necessarily mean with our romantic partner, but in friendships and relationships, where if we said something like that, it would maybe shatter that relationship. And so we then don't open up and become vulnerable. But maybe we need to turn it around the other way and saying, why am I in this relationship that would be shattered if I became vulnerable?
Well,
don't I want ones where I actually can say,
right.
You know what, I know we were meant to have a great night out tonight, but I'm feeling really awful. Can we just sit quietly at home and open a bottle of wine or something? Don't we want friendships and relationships like that?
100%. And there's two things that comes up for me. One of them is assumptions. So I think a lot of people make up the assumption that if they did say that, the relationship would shatter, but chances are sometimes the relationship wouldn't shatter. So that's also holding up that the assumption is with us, not just necessarily the other person. And something I just had, there was a second point that just escaped me.
You know, when you have a microphone in front of you, you're never meant to say two things, because the second one escapes you. That's the rule, isn't it?
The first thing I want to say is, that's the only thing.
Exactly.
It'll come
no,
back.
But you're right. But actually, it's very interesting, actually, because we need to say, why are we assuming that the relationship would shatter if I become vulnerable? And it's because...
sorry, I know what it is. I just came back before I forget. The second thing is, I've noticed this, maybe you've noticed this. I've been actually, I can testify for myself, and I've seen other people. People tend to open up with a group of strangers more than they would with a group of their family, friends, closest colleagues, etc.
For sure.
Is that crazy? Or is it?
You see, I don't think it is crazy.
Because the relationship's not at stake? Because you're not afraid of shattering the relationship? That makes so much sense.
There's take it to the extreme. A total stranger who you'll never ever see again, like the person who maybe is next to you on the plane or the train or whatever, that there's a strong likelihood this is literally the only time in your lives that the two of you will have a conversation. Yeah. You can have the most amazing, profound conversation with that person. And this is the type of conversation that now in therapy we cultivate, or in the confessional in the Catholic Church, or through shamans or whatever. We tend to say this is, if you like, an isolated conversation which has no agenda, has no jeopardy, and therefore you can say what you like. And people who travel a lot for work often talk about the it's a cliche in film almost, the conversation they have late night in the hotel bar with another person who travels a lot for work. And good literature and good drama is often about where do you now go with that relationship now you've opened up. Whereas with family, we can't get rid of our family. I can't not reply to my relatives just in the way I'm not replying to two toxic people in my life.
That? So that's an interesting point.
Because
why
we're
not
brought
get rid of family who are toxic.
Because unfortunately. Fortunately for me, I don't really have toxic relationships in my family, but I do know people who do. And it's very, very tough because it's almost like you're stuck with family. That's sort of the culture is telling us that's the rule. Blood is thicker than water, whatever the cliches are. We're saying that your relatives, you're stuck with, even if you've said something awful or they said something awful. And many dysfunctional families are wrestling with, if you like, a kind of guilt that...
I can't divorce my mum.
Exactly. I'm meant to be friendly with these people who who I loathe. But the interesting thing is, you're right, with strangers, we tend to be able to open up more. And maybe what we need to do is little experiments with our friends to open up more. And maybe the first one is saying something like, how are you? And then listening, like the guy at the Royal Mail said he wanted his colleagues to be doing to each other. And for us to be able to say to our friend, you know what? I've had some ups and downs. I'm in a bit of a down at the moment, but I'm pleased to see you. Or some sort of phrase like that, which is the honest response often with our friends. Or to be able to say, I'm not going to come out tonight. I don't really feel like a crazy night in the bar or whatever it is. Now, the problem is what we get is amazing peer pressure. We're used to the idea that adolescents have peer pressure all the time, but I think we adults have it insanely as well.
Workplaces have them.
Workplaces enormously. I mean, I'm very worried, and I'll say the brand, by the WeWork philosophy, for example, which is it seems to be very much about let's socialize together, let's drink together, let's play ping pong together, if you like. This kind of co-working philosophy. We're in a co-working space here, which seems to be slightly different in vibe. But, WeWork, which if you like is trying to become the Uber of the way we work together in the future.
Did you see the financial results this year? That's crazy.
Well, there's a whole separate conversation to be had here about the financial results of Silicon Valley companies.
The loss that they made is just nuts.
But Uber's loss is crazy. In any other sector,
growth
at loss. I mean, what's the cliche? And somebody said it very wittily. He said, your business model is basically buying dollar bills and selling them for 50 cents. Of course, everyone's going to buy this. Everyone's going to buy your dollar bills for 50 cents, and you make the 50-cent loss. Yeah. So, but coming back to WeWork's idea about socializing is that I don't think I'm alone in finding one of the most awful things you have to do in your social life is to have a good time at sort of the obligatory good time events when you're not really into having a good time. You're not really in a good mood or whatever.
Have you read the book Quiet?
No, tell me about Quiet.
It's quite, it's the book that was written about introverts and actually had the story. The reason I'm mentioning it, I heard her say the story. I forgot the name of her author. I'm terrible with names. Effectively, she was at this summer camp and she's having a great time. And suddenly the organizer was like, right, everybody come over here. We're going to sing along together. We're going to have a great time. And she was like, I was having a great time
already.
Yes. Exactly. Before you got me over
Yeah.
to here. And I feel that's like organized fun.
Yeah, organized fun. Forget it. Fun should be spontaneous and be a genuine demonstration of people enjoying each other's company.
Okay. But what happens, so I like what you're saying, and I want to add, so imagine co-working spaces by nature, like the one we're in, Work.life, right? And WeWork, what have you, Mindspace, just a shout out to a bunch of them. One of the things that people join them is, quote unquote, to be part of community.
Sure.
Like, right? Whatever that means to you, whether that means I'm sitting next to you, but we never talk to each other, but I know there's a human breathing next to me, or it means over coffee, hey, David, how was your day? What are you working on? Or it means let's have pizza and beers and socialize. What also happens is that, have you heard of the bystander effect and the fusion of responsibility?
No, tell me that.
Okay, very, very quick. I talk about this on the podcast. Effectively, it's this idea that the more people there are, the less likely you are to act. So the fewer people are, if there's an emergency or an accident, you are likely to respond. But if you see there's 10 people, 20 people, it goes down by percentage by other people. Okay. Sure. So what happens is, if no one's speaking to each other, no one's interacting, then that becomes the script, the unspoken agreement that we all have. Okay? Even if there are people who might want to be able to interact, how do you then separate those who want to interact, those who want to be left alone? I saw this at my gym. So my local gym, as you know, I'm a chatty kind of guy. So I go in the gym, we're all kind of naked getting changed, and I'm just chatting to people like, hey, that was a hard workout, how was yours? And this really landed for me. This guy said to me, I thought that this gym, everyone was really kind of a bit distant, a bit not friendly. And I was like, my experience is completely different because I talk to everybody.
Right.
I'm that guy. And so I found that lots of people are actually willing to chat if you're willing to engage them. So to come back to your yes to like organized fun, no, I get that. But is there a middle ground?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, the truth is, don't get me wrong, I'm not against organised fun, and I've had lots of fun at organised fun events, but I am against that being the only option for socialising, and there are judgment made against you if you don't want to be part of that. I think that's important.
Look at him, he's not drinking beer and pizza, he's still working.
I think that's very important, or has gone home.
Yes.
Because my worry is the long hours we work in our workplace. I'm very interested that the idea of the 4-day week has come back into our political discussion. I know it's come from the Labour Party at the moment in the Labour Party conference, but also it's coming from the right as well. I think we might discover that actually the 4-day week is a very good place for us to be aiming in Britain in terms of work hours. Yeah. But at the moment there is a pressure, and I think it's ironically compounded by shared workspaces to just sort of stay in, because what we're doing is we're blurring the line between work and socializing, which is perfectly reasonable. However, it's not reasonable if there are other aspects of our social life which are not connected to our work relationships, which are suffering as a result. And I don't want to be the sort of person who works here or we work who because of what I want to do in the evening at 6:15, leaves at 5:45 here and doesn't play the ping pong and have the beer and whatnot, and is therefore judged as a result of that, because there is a kind of bro atmosphere which we have imported through these workspaces from Silicon Valley, which I think we need to question. I don't mean we need to criticize, but we just need to question and say, is this the work culture for me? And if it isn't, can I be in a place where it's not seen as a negative thing for me to pull out of that inclusion. Socializing?
Right, there's the difference between, someone told me this, the difference between inclusion, something about you invite everyone to the party, and then the other one is you invite them for the dance. There's something about, like, you can come to the party if you want to, but it doesn't matter if you don't want to come, but like, just know that you're welcomed, and it's okay if you don't want to come. Like, normalize the participation and the not participation of it.
Okay.
We're coming to the end of the interview.
I want to add something then on that about community from, there's an American sociologist called Parker Palmer. I don't know if we've spoken about him before. I think he's still living. He'll be quite old if he is. He's a kind of a Christian sociologist, and he has written very wonderfully about depression. But he also has written very wonderfully about community. And he has a very good definition of community. And this is probably a nice place for us to end, actually. Yeah. He says, community is not a group of people who are like you, all hanging out together. It's a group of people who are very different from you, with whom you don't necessarily agree, hanging out together. That's what a community is. And that seems to me the kind of skills that we need to develop. That actually, if somebody doesn't want to come to the party, they're still part of our community, and we need to be able to incorporate them and be with them, rather than everyone has the beer and the ping pong and the dance.
So interesting you say that, because I'm part of a group of a kind, we call it a tribe, right? They call it the Bluebird Tribe. We did a leadership program in 2015. There was about 23 of us, I think, that went through that year program, and we continued every year to organize a meetup every 9 months. So we're now on our 10th retreat, I believe, in Norway next year. And what's been interesting is people have been dipping in and out. Some people have actually left, some people have gone, some people come in and out. And I used to have this obsession of, like, everybody has to be there. Everybody has to be here. But actually, maybe it's like, it's just an organic matter. Yeah. Those who want to belong here. And if you're not here, I still hold you part of this community in one way, shape, or another. But it's okay if you want to come in, and it's okay if you want to come out.
And isn't that a lovely definition of what a good friendship is? It's okay if you want to come in, and it's okay if you want to come out.
Yes.
And I'll be here for when you want to come back.
Well, I think it's a healthy attachment. It's like, as opposed to, the kind of I forgot what it is in relationship matters, in parenting, about the attachment dependency, something like that. Yeah. David, as always, this hour went
as always, Mark.
I mean,
what a treat.
I didn't even get to ask you about Brexit, didn't get to talk to you about Greta Thunberg, when I want to talk more about, she's been nominated for Nobel Peace Prize.
Right.
I've seen so much more I wanted to ask.
Well,
but as always, David, this is why I want to get you back on the show.
It'll be a real pleasure, and it's been a pleasure. Congratulations on the podcast. Congratulations on the coasters.
Thank you so much.
Very nice to spend time with you, Mark. Lovely. Thanks so much indeed.
Before we wrap up, I've got to ask you the last questions, which I ask everybody, right?
Sure.
Before I do that, thank you as always, David, for your generosity of time. You always bring a different perspective to my world and to people listening. You've always got interesting questions and stories, and please never stop being curious. And not that you've lost someone, but I wish you a long life.
Thank you.
But that's what I want to tell you.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year, obviously. Is there something still that most people don't know about you?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And you're keeping it that way?
Right now, yeah.
I know your face. Okay. And then the other thing is, what does being unconventional mean to you today?
That's a very good question, because I immediately thought of the word maverick, and I love the word maverick because I think maverick people are doing two important things, and I'm thinking about what I'm trying to do myself here. One is question almost everything, not in a destructive way, but in a kind of inquiring way. And secondly, show to other people that you can plow your own furrow, I think. So for me, unconventional means being human. Actually, it means actually saying we don't necessarily need to follow the same route that the culture lays down. Doesn't need to be a completely different route, but we can do our own alterations, and that's what makes human life human.
Love it. David, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Do you hang on online? Is there anywhere that people can connect with you online these days?
Well, I have an email address. So my website which you can email me through, and it'd be a pleasure to hear from you, my name is David Baker. So it's davidbakeronline.com, which sounds so wonderfully old-fashioned, like when it was actually online was like a cool thing, you know. Anyway, davidbakeronline.com, and it'd be a pleasure to hear from
David,
people.
as always, this was the fourth time and not the last time.
I really hope so. Great pleasure, Mark. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's powerful conversation with David. Again, a fan favorite, fourth time on the show, never fails to blow my mind, and an hour goes by in a second. Apparently, that was the theory of relativity. It's when an hour seems like a minute and a minute seems like an hour. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please make sure to leave a rating and review over on iTunes and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you do one thing, do this. Share this episode with one person who needs to hear their minds being expanded about human skills, not soft skills, not hard skills, but human skills, and why we all need to belong in a community in some way, shape, or form, even if we don't agree, even if we don't want to be there, but that's what community truly is. As always, stay tuned for more inspiring conversations coming up next week. I'll see you then. Today's episode is brought to you by VivoLife. Now, we all know the critical importance of protein to sustain a healthy diet, and I'd love to sit here and tell you that we should all get that from whole foods, but the truth is, like me, you might be living a busy lifestyle, and I'm often running from meeting to meeting, and I was looking for the perfect protein powder that could help me sustain my energy throughout the day and also recover after my workouts. Problem is, most proteins out there are filled with sweeteners, artificial flavoring, and ingredients, and because they're made from mostly dairy products, tend to not really agree with my digestive system. So that's why in 2014, I started exploring and experimenting with plant-based proteins. But the truth is, back then, the taste, the texture, the smell was just a little nasty. And so I just put up with it because I was looking for a plant-based protein that was good for your health, backed by science, and didn't do too much harm to the planet. But in 2017, something changed. I actually came across VivoLife. VivoLife make 100% natural health supplement and products that deliver straight to your door via carbon neutral delivery. Now, let me tell you, I was blown away. Not only did the protein taste great, it also looked amazing, it mixed well, but beyond that, it was by far the healthiest protein on the market that I could find. The reason being is that in every serving you get 25 grams of plant-based protein, and it's not just any protein, it's fermented protein, which is amazing for digestion. On top of that, you get 6 grams of branched chain amino acids in each serving, and you also get some turmeric extract, which is phenomenal for anti-inflammatory properties, which helps me speed up my recovery. Now, what I usually do after a workout is I'll use some Madagascar vanilla or the salted maca caramel. Those are my two favorite flavors. I'll throw in a banana, maybe some dark leafy greens, some almond milk, some water, maybe some flax seeds, shake it all up, and it tastes amazing. So if you're looking for a healthy, natural, plant-based protein that's going to get you results, tastes amazing, and does good for the planet, then head over to vivolife.co.uk and use the discount code MARK when you check out to get 10% off your first order. And remember, every purchase you make using the discount code helps support the Unconventionalists Podcast. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for keeping the lights on in the studio. Hey gang, I wanted to remind you that if you want to launch your podcast and you don't want to spend years and a ton of money trying to figure out how and make mistakes along the way, then head over to theunconventionalist.com, click on online courses, and make sure to enter the code PODCASTTRIBE to get 20% off my brand new online video program that's called How to Launch a Successful Podcast from Scratch. I've poured everything I know into that, my love, my heart, my knowledge, and my know-how for you. You can literally take that course from the comfort of your own home and launch a world-class podcast within days. So stop waiting, stop wasting time, head over to theunconventionalist.com and get your ticket to my online video program now. I'll see you in there.